Welcome to People with Purpose. I am your host, Sylvain Rochon. I'm a speaker, an author, a serial entrepreneur, and a business strategist. My purpose is to engineer a paradise on Earth using cutting-edge technology. I hope this show will give you excellent examples of individuals that chose to do great things in their personal and professional lives. Perhaps they will inspire you to follow in their footsteps. The show's format is very simple. I ask my guests 3 simple questions. What is your personal purpose? Why is it important to you? And how did you get started? Now let's hear from our guest.
Good afternoon, evening, and morning, everybody that's watching this video. I am happy that you are here. I have with me Anita Kulp. She is an entertainment investment counselor and a cryptocurrency and blockchain enthusiast, and a good friend of mine for the past 2.5, 3 years. We have several projects we talk about constantly, and a great person. Hello, Anita.
Hi, Sylvain.
Nice to be here on nice of you to be here on People for Purpose. Now I'm going to jump right into it, since just to let you guys know that are listening. We've done this recording before, but this is take 2. We wanted to do a little bit better, so we're doing a second try. It's all good. Let's enjoy ourselves. So, Anita, straight to the question: what is your life purpose?
Well, a number of years ago, I kind of intuited that it was important for me to help to establish an alternative financial and economic backbone on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was contemplating the question right from the get-go, what is your life purpose? I had to say, okay, well, that's really my life purpose. And as I looked back on my professional experience and what I've done in my life, I could see that there truly has been a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with being a financial planner, which means I had my Series 7 license, I had my Series 63 and mutual fund license. So I really loved working. I love working with systems, large systems. And as a financial planner, I was able to boil down and kind of in language that any person could understand these very complex systems of investing in stocks and bonds and mutual funds and limited partnerships and so on.
Mm.
And so then I've owned a coffee house and roastery, and that put me into more of a retail setting. And I've owned a commodities trading house, trading firm in San Francisco, which was in Chinatown. Very interesting. That's when I had to get my Series 3 license. So I've really always been involved with and passionate about the financial markets,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's the short-term markets, as in options on futures or commodities, or longer-term markets, the Forex market. I just think it's the greatest thing. So, and that kind of led me into really digging into Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? I just had this urge, this inner prompting at one point back in 2014. What is Bitcoin? I didn't have a clue. And what is cryptocurrency? And I really had to dive in and understand and grok, okay, what is this thing that's this intangible that people are buying and selling and trading? And there's derivatives markets that have actually opened up that are based on cryptocurrencies. And what is that all about? And how do you trade one with against another one? And then to watch all of the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And the regulatory bodies to change their minds, and who has control and who has jurisdiction over some of these cryptocurrencies at the moment. But there's another theme, and we didn't get to talk about this the first time around. One of the main reasons I wanted to have a chance to really speak to this. I'm also very passionate about Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been involved in a number of different projects through the years. I lived in Africa. I married an African politician. And so actually lived in Africa for a couple of years. And I'm now actually combining all of my passions into doing some work in Namibia, in Southern Africa. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And if you can you describe to us like why? I mean, finances and the economy is usually considered a fairly dry, impersonal concept, right? It's numbers, right? It's currency, it's money, and things that we use, but not necessarily. It's just about as far as to human in consideration as we can go. Like usually people, I think an accountant, for example, is just a bean counter. I mean, the accounting machine, that's all it is, right?
Right.
So, but you have a very human approach to about everything you do and how you're thinking. So how do you marry your purpose of that you describe as creating systems around currency and your love for Africa, which is very human, right? The human aspect, and I know you also as beyond this, like as just as an individual, you're very, you're touching humanity constantly, right? Mm-hmm. So how does it all fit together as one?
Well, that's really interesting that there would be a distinction, because for me, it all is part of left brain, right brain, whole brain, thinking. I think just being a woman and being more in touch with, for me, being more in touch with my heart, being more in touch with my, who am I in the world, and why am I here on the world? Not so much as far as purpose and direction and fulfillment in that arena, but as an individual, I'm much more about service to others than I am about service to self.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really answer your question around how do you bring these complex linear logical systems into this humanitarian passion and conviction. And all I can say is it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't really try and figure out, okay, how am I going to bring this into the humane? It just is the way it's the way I'm built. It's just the way who I am on the inside and on the outside. So to me, it's normal.
So it's not a business plan, right?
No.
There was no plan.
No.
But here's another question that may be helpful here. How is, I guess, an economy in general, as well as the emerging new trends in financing and economy, how do those benefit humanity, the human parts of us and society?
I think the word that best describes that is the application.
Mm-hmm.
How do we apply those systems, those technologies, those platforms, those processes? How can that make a farmer in Namibia, in a village, how can that make their life better?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start looking at blockchain technologies, for example, and the way in which governments can utilize the blockchain for securing information, for ensuring that everything is equal, that if someone gets fined, they have to pay their fines, all different elements of government that would help make the life of that person in the village better. It would streamline the government, therefore there wouldn't be as much bloat, therefore there would be more money available for programs and projects for primarily rural areas and people that really do need a hand up, a leg up.
Mm-hmm.
There's many ways, but the answer comes down to the application and how can we apply this technology for the betterment of humanity. And not everyone who invents a technology or who is interested in the tech space whatsoever, or even in financial systems, if their own personal bias is, how can I make the most money out of doing this, then they're not going to be looking for answers or ways to apply the same technology as I would, for example.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So my natural bias is always going to be, what can I do to help? What can I do to take the gifts and the things that I've been given and share that with those who do not have the same opportunities that I do.
Yeah.
So
I think that's encapsulates a lot of guidance, I guess, that I feel as well. Like, how can I, because we're not so dissimilar, you and I. How can I do to help humanity? And I don't approach it from a financing or financial systems point of view, because that's not me, right? I approach it from a different direction, which is a lot more like starting new businesses and entertainment, because that's what I love, and that's how I see how I can help. So I totally understand you. Now, I'd like to touch on what's happening in Kenya. Like, I know we talked about it, like about the M-Pesa, sorry, not M-Pesa, 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 yeah, because that's a great example of innovation. Well, you were not involved in this one in any way,
No.
but I think for the audience, it could be an example of what can be worked out, right?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I looked at M-Pesa back in 2014 when I was really digging into cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. It's my understanding that what M-Pesa was really set up to do was to facilitate funds transfer from primarily the UK to family members. So if a family member is living in the UK and wants to send money back home, how do they do it in a most efficient way and in a cost-effective way?
Mm-hmm.
So it's my understanding that M-Pesa originally decided that using Bitcoin, because there is no line of demarcation or geography that I mean, you buy Bitcoin, you send Bitcoin to a wallet, there you are.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to make it effective, what M-Pesa decided to do in having the people send Bitcoin to them and then having them transfer it, how do they distribute it? So they decided to work with a telecom company and to utilize the digital money that's already being traded throughout Kenya. And that's their distribution mechanism, as I remember it anyway. I might be off, but that's what I remember. And yeah, it's incredible. It's really, really taken hold.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics shows that the M-Pesa, which is a cryptocurrency now, that's fairly established. Actually, it's very well established because it accounts for 40% of the country's GDP nowadays, enabling a bunch of people that usually don't have access to banking at all to do all sorts of stuff that they were not able to do previously, right? And that's really exciting. In North America and in Europe, everybody has a bank account. You kind of have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're stuck in our culture. So we take it for granted. We have access to these tools, the loans and credit cards and whatever else we need. But in Africa, it's not not as clear. You don't necessarily have these usage. So that's I guess one way new technologies and new systems, right? New financial systems can help the farmer and help the tradesman and help whoever in other areas. Also microtransactions, right? The whole principles of transaction and loaning all even small amounts through a system that is not controlled with the huge fees that you don't want to pay.
Exactly.
Right?
I can give you another example.
Go ahead.
This is what led me to the company that I'm working with right now. I am a co-owner of a company in Cameroon where I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my husband, who was running in the presidential elections, had decided that the best way that he could affect the economy in Cameroon was, in fact, to make that there would be an incentive for people to have bank accounts. So in other words, until any economy, when you have 80 to 90% of the population using bank accounts, then your economy can, in fact, grow.
Mm-hmm.
in Cameroon, that is just not the case. And you might have, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's a very low percentage of people that trust the banks, number one, or would even use banks. And so what Antoine had really devised was a company that we started to bring about a mechanism so that those in the informal sector, which is 70% of the population, would be able to contribute to their social security system.
Interesting. Okay.
And so in order to facilitate that, so that there could be payments going into their social security accounts and also benefits being paid out, in order to do that, they would have to facilitate or have a bank account. So this was the way that Antoine, as a presidential candidate, had decided he could best serve that sector by getting people to actually have bank accounts. And what I was looking for at that time was a way that the agents that would go into the markets wouldn't have to carry cash.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we have agents, a private company that's actually making that facilitation for those in the informal sector, although the law existed, there was not a mechanism by which the people in the informal sector could contribute physically. There was no mechanism for it. So that's what SOCAPSI, Société Camerounaise de Prévoyance Sociale pour le Secteur Informel. SOCAPSI.
Cool.
We developed it as a private company where we would have people go out into the informal sector in marketplaces and so on. And I didn't want them carrying cash because they would become targets. But at that time, having been, digging into Bitcoin, digging into blockchain technologies, I found a protocol or a blockchain that we could have used so that we would have been using a digital or cryptocurrency to transfer the funds from the people in the markets and in the informal sector to go into their account in the Social Security system. So I came upon Trustor and worked with the founders of Trustor. And similar to you and I, they developed Trustor as a blockchain technology specific to India, but it's to serve the unbanked in India.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they developed it in the first place. So although we were unable to get Trustor off the ground in Cameroon, there were some other legalities and the legislation in Cameroon was not really open to blockchain technology at that point.
Yeah.
Back in 2014, so we weren't able to do that. But kind of bringing things full circle, as a result of that, I've now been able to introduce this blockchain to several arenas in Namibia, and we're working right now to get that established.
It's exciting stuff. And where do you think, like going back to you yourself, where do you think this motivation to help people, when did you start feeling this? Where, not necessarily the financial parts, because I'm assuming that came after some level of education and whatnot, but where do you think this all comes from, this passion to just help the world?
I think it probably came from my upbringing. There were a lot of elements that was really more about helping others in different ways, perhaps not in the same ways as I interpreted it, but I think it really was something that was instilled in me as a small person, small little girl. And it grew with me, and then it developed, and it became something. And many years ago, I was on the the African Chamber of Commerce of the Pacific Northwest when I lived in Seattle. And that must go back 15, 20 years now. I just knew that I wanted to, I felt that I had been given an incredible mind and an incredible ability to synthesize complex systems And my focus has been Africa ever since. It's like, you know, I'm not focused on Asia, and I'm not focused on India, and I'm not focused on America. My focus has always been Africa, you know, so technology is, okay, how can I work with that in Africa? And then after some years marrying Antoine and going to Cameroon and spending time in Cameroon and, you know, really seeing life from the inside out, you know, the political system from the inside out, not, you know, an American looking from here and looking at their political system or their economic system or their legislation or. So it's just kind of refined itself as I've grown as a human being and as an individual.
So it seems to me like it's almost instinct, kind of following your nose like the toucan, right?
Yeah.
With the cereal, just follow your nose. It always knows.
The nose knows, yeah. And I, you know, I'm not a professed religious person at all, but I'm a deeply spiritual person. So what that means to me is I look inside for the answers, because I feel for me, I'm connected to something that's bigger than me. And it doesn't matter what you might want to call that or what religions might want to call that, whether it's God, the universe, spirit, whatever that might be. That's my grounding, and that's where I find my answers. And I find the synchronicities that happen in my life are the guideposts. They're the things that say, oh, you're really on track here, or yeah, not so much. You know? I mean, nothing is ever like, you know, full speed ahead, you know, in one direction. It's always, you know, you're going left and right and left and right. But when you have that centeredness, and you have the expectation that you're going to see something show up in your world that's going to be a signpost, go that way, and you just keep following and navigating life in that way. And I do the same in my business life as well.
Yeah, just going with your gut, and rewards essentially just come with the territory as you weave into the path, right?
And often we never know. I mean, you just don't know. You had a conversation with somebody 4 or 5 years ago, and now all of a sudden it becomes really relevant. I mean, I had no idea when I was diving into Bitcoin. I didn't buy Bitcoin at that time. I didn't really get, you know, I'd studied it, and I studied some of the professional coursework around becoming a Bitcoin professional. That wasn't really it for me. And after about 9 weeks, the light switch went off, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm done with that. Little did I know that several years later, I would come into contact with Trustor, at that time the Trustor Foundation, and develop a relationship with them, so that several years later, so a business partner could come to me and say, we need to do something about developing a digital currency. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I could make a phone call, you know. So it's you don't really know why you make a left-hand turn, or why you feel prompted to call that individual, or reach out to that person, or send an email to that person. Oftentimes it has nothing to do with what you initially thought, but it's all part of the journey. And so I really appreciated your initial question to me when we first talked about doing this interview. What is your life purpose? And in looking backwards, I can see the pattern.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to determine what that pattern was ahead of time. I would never have known.
I mean, speaking for myself, I started university. I remember then, it was, you know, over 20 years ago. My idea was I wanted to become a scientist, like work in the lab.
Wow.
I've never worked in the lab. I went from that to to business and entertainment and things that I love, but I didn't know I loved so much. Right? I had to discover. So yeah, you never know. You never know where life is gonna bring you. So Anita, on that point, since you have some people that are watching this and they may be on that somewhere along their own path, looking for advice or some guidance, what kind of guidance would you give them?
I think that what works for me, and I can only speak to what works for me, and that is if I have a question or if I have something that's kind of shown up, I get really quiet. And some people will call it meditation, some people will call it prayer, some people will call it journaling.
Mm-hmm.
I personally write. So my practice is every morning I have my cup of coffee and I sit down and I write. And that to me is what helps get me clear around, okay, I'm focused on a question, I'm focused on looking for an answer. The answer's got to come from within me. It's going to either manifest externally or it's going to manifest within me, and it's just a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like opening up a channel to a bigger part of me that can see more than I can see. And so writing is what really helps me. But my experience has been such that I'm not going to find the answer if I'm looking out there. Anywhere outside, I'm not going to I might find a signpost because I've gone inward and I've asked the question and I'm looking for guidance. The guidance is going to come from here, and I might see a signpost, but I'm not, if I go ask you, or if I ask somebody else, or turn on the TV and think I'm going to find my answer, I'm not going to find it there. I'm going to find it here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to feel, for me, it's not just a knowing, it's going to feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the indication for me that, oh, that got pointed over there, that signpost. Oh, wow, that really feels good to me. I'm going to take the next step. The other piece of advice that I would have is don't try and see what the end result is always going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because often the way life seems to work for me is, again, I can only speak to my personal experience in life. I might get to see what the next step is, but if I tried to project and mentally determine what step 5 and through 10 is going to be, I'll never know.
So better be open to possibilities.
I think you have to really learn who you are, know thyself and trust yourself, and know that if you feel so inclined that you're connected to something bigger than yourself that's helping to guide you in your life, and just learn to trust that. Instinct, intuition, whatever you want to call it, learn to trust that. You know far more about yourself and your life than anybody else does. Nobody else knows what your life path is. I don't care if they're your husband or your girlfriend, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunts, your uncles. They don't know what your life path is. You do.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from in here.
I think that's really powerful. That's really powerful. And thank you for sharing this. I'm glad you participated in the show a second time.
Yeah.
And get this down. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So
Although
thanks a lot, Anita.
The two were very different. And
It's true.
Third, it would be different again. But again, thank you for your having me on. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Perfectly powerful.
Okay.
Thanks, Anita.
I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share. Please join me also on Clubify, a social app allowing us to share ideas and where you can participate in some of my projects. The link is in the section below. Also, if you wish to recommend someone great I should interview, please let me know. And as always, follow your passion. See you next week.